Welcome to Scottsdale Community Garden, which is on the campus of Scottsdale Community College in Arizona. This place is amazing. It's been here since, I believe, the mid-1970s, about 140 plots, so it's quite big. And each plot is roughly 20 by 30 feet, so a lot of space here. It's almost like a cross between a garden and a farm, really. So we're going to build a raised bed this morning out of wood. A couple of things I'd like to sort of give an overview about with this particular bed, just to give an idea of how we're going to do it. I chose to build this out of just straight Douglas pine, or Douglas fir, which is pine. It's an untreated wood, and the reason I chose that is because pressure treated wood, granted it will last a lot longer, it'll be more impervious to pests and rot and so on, but since this is a raised bed for vegetables, for food production, I'd rather keep the chemicals away from the soil. So I chose an untreated wood. It will break down a little faster, but we'll replace it when the time comes. So some important considerations when you make these are, in addition to the materials you use, sizing. Now, you can make them any size you like, obviously, but a few things to keep in mind. One big recommendation is to not make them any wider than 4 feet at the most. And the reason why is because you want to be able to reach to the middle of the bed from one side or the other, without stepping into the bed and compacting the soil. So I've chosen to make these actually 3 feet wide, just because they fit into my geometry here a little bit better, which will be even easier for me to reach the middle, which is great. The length can be anything you like, so that doesn't really matter as long as it fits into your space. I've chosen 7 feet long, 3 feet wide. And the nice thing about that particular dimension is when I bought these boards at the store, the lumber yard, they come in 10-foot lengths. One cut at the 3-foot mark gives me a 3-foot and a 7-foot section. I buy 2 boards for each bed, and there's 0 waste. I use every bit of wood that I bought, which is great too. You don't want to waste. If you're paying for it, you may as well use it. So this dimension works for me. 7 feet long, 3 feet wide, 2 10-foot boards, and I'm good to go. Okay, so as you can see, we've already begun building beds here. There will be 6 total. There are 4 so far, and they're all in the same dimension, just to make the construction a little bit more uniform and easier on me. The one thing I didn't point out when I mentioned earlier is that each corner does have an additional 2x4 brace put in for extra support, extra durability at those joints to keep them together. Okay, so that's an overview of what we're doing today and a little bit of background as to why. So let's go ahead and get into it and start building bed number 5 out of 6. One thing to keep in mind when you're making these beds is, as much as possible, build them in place where you think they're going to be. The reason is, obviously, they're pretty heavy when they're finished, and so if it's in place in the right site, you'll be a lot happier when it's all done. So this is roughly where it's going to be. You can fine-tune it a little bit later, and the ground has been leveled for the most part, so go ahead and build it right in its spot. To attach the ends to the lengthwise pieces, I like to use these deck screws. Any kind of deck screw. They're exterior rated, so they're a little bit have more longevity out in the elements. And I find that the 3-inch deck screw works really well. This is a 2x10 board. I didn't mention that earlier. This is a 2x10 board in a 10-foot length. And the width with lumber is not really accurate. It's not really 2 inches, it's 1.5 inches. So with 1.5 inches thickness on this board, 3 inches will get you another 1.5 inches in to this one. So it's a nice solid connection. So the 3-inch deck screw works really well. And while it's not absolutely necessary with these particular screws, it depends on the one you're using, I do like to drill a pilot hole before I insert the screw, just to make it a little bit easier on myself. I like to get the first one in so the boards don't move around. The basic idea of a pilot hole is just to get a little bit of a starter hole for the screw to go into. It takes a little bit of the wood out and makes it easier for the screw to go through. Of course, the pilot hole needs to be smaller than the diameter of the shank of the screw. If it's too big, of course the screw won't have anything to hold on to. Most importantly, it helps prevent wood from splitting. Sometimes it has a tendency to split with a screw that just goes in without a pilot hole. So just a little bit of extra insurance. Again, it's not totally necessary. In fact, these particular screws say that it's not necessary. I do it anyway just because it's a little bit of insurance. And it makes driving the screw in a lot easier as well. Okay, so we've attached our first two pieces together, doing just the corner attachment. Basically what I've done is I've put in 3 deck screws from board to board. 1, 2, 3, they're each 3 inches long. Once I go and do the other 3 corners in this same way, then we'll go through and add the corner brace, which is what this 2x4 section is for. And it's in the same length here as this board is tall. So it's roughly 9.5 inches tall to match the same height. And when we get to this point, what we'll do is, this will go in. You can do either orientation you like. I'm doing it this way. And we'll use 4 more screws total, 2 this way, and then 2 this way. This piece might be interesting because it's got a big knot in it. So, see how that works. This one I'm going to try to avoid going through this knot. So I went ahead and drilled 2 more pilot holes. Typically I would have them evenly spaced, 1, 2, and 3. This one I did a little bit off the center, simply because there's a big knot in the wood here, unfortunately. And knots can just be a little bit difficult to drill through and a little unpredictable too. So I just chose to avoid the knot by drilling a little bit lower. It just makes things a little bit easier. When we do the other corners, you'll see that these screws will be, for the most part, equidistant from each other. But in this case, just trying to avoid the knot. All right, so we have 3 of the boards attached to each other with 2 corners. And now it gets a little bit easier because it's held together pretty securely, pretty stable, so things won't move around on us quite as much. All right, so we are attaching corner number 3. First of all, just drilling the pilot holes, and then we'll get the screws in and get it secure. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and drill the next 2 pilot holes, the last 2 pilot holes in this corner. Okay, the 2 pilot holes are drilled, and we can go ahead and drive in those next 2 screws. Okay, the 3rd corner is secure. Our 4th and I'm going to attach our 4th and final corner here, and once we do that, then we can go ahead and put the brace pieces in. But first things first, let's go ahead and just get the regular pilot holes and screws inserted. Now we take a look and see how it looks before we put those braces in, because then it's going to be really done. It looks fairly good. Sometimes people will go ahead and measure from corner to corner to make sure everything is perfectly square. I'm not going to do that because I don't particularly care. As long as everything looks secure and relatively straight, I'm good to go. So the corners look secure and all the screws are in as far as they can go. So I'm happy. Okay, so like I said, time to attach the corner braces and we'll be good to go. Okay, so we're going to attach the corner braces now. This is just a 2x4 section. You can use actually any scrap wood that you have if you have some 2x3s instead of 2x4s. In fact, that's what I did here. I had some old 2x3s, so I used that. That works fine too. Anyhow, you want to cut it in a length that is equal to the height of the bed. And this being a 2x10, it's about 9.5 inches tall. So that's the length I cut the 2x4s. And it should fit right in place to be the correct height. Okay, so this is a 2x10 board and this is a 2x4, but really the width is only 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches. So 1.5 inches twice is 3 inches, and in which case the 3-inch screws I've been using would probably go right through the wood. I don't want that to happen. So for just this particular attachment, I'm going to use 2.5-inch screws, so they're a bit shorter. And that way, I don't run the danger of piercing through the wood. The 3-inch screw is fine everywhere else, and in fact even this direction like this. But for this particular one, the 2.5 is better. Just an important point. I'll use 2 this direction and then 2 the other direction, so 4 screws total. Okay, 2 pilot holes are drilled. Now all we need to do is sink those 2.5-inch deck screws into the holes. All right, that's nice and secure. Now we'll attach 2 more screws going in this direction to hold it in this way. And again, I can use the 3-inch deck screws in this case because there's plenty of length of wood to accommodate that. Switching back and forth from drill bit to screwdriver bit is probably what takes the most time in building these raised beds. So if you happen to have 2 of these power cordless drills, go ahead and use them both. You'll save a lot of time. All right, one important point I want to make here is that, and this hasn't come up until now, but since we're going in an opposite direction with the screws, you want to make sure that the screw you're driving this direction doesn't hit the screw that's already in place going that direction. They could intersect, you don't want them to hit each other. So easy to avoid, just make sure wherever you put this one in on this side is at a different height to where any of these existing screws are. So that's why I made these 2 on the same height here, so that I could drill between them going this direction. I know this is a clean spot to go into. Same thing here. All right, so I know that if I drill right through here, I'm not going to intersect with that screw like that here or here. So that's a nice clean area. And I'd approximate it right here. So that should be safe to go into. Okay, and then same thing down here. That should be safe. Okay, pilot holes are done. All right, and that is one completely finished corner. 3 screws in attaching the 2 boards, and then 2 more screws on either end. 2 here, 2 here, holds the corner brace in, and that's a nice, really secure corner. So we'll repeat the process at the other 3, and we'll have a bed. Okay, so bed number 5 is done, and I'm really happy with it. It seemed to come together pretty easily. All the pieces are nice and flush. It seems relatively straight. I did not measure corner to corner because, again, I wasn't that concerned with it, but you could do that to make sure everything is square. But in generally, I'm really happy, and I'm really excited to get these filled with good compost and good soil and get some seeds in them. That's the next step. I'm really excited, but one thing at a time. There's 1 more bed to go right over in that spot, and then by that time, fall will be here. It'll be a little cooler, and we'll be looking forward to a good garden. Okay, so I have a pile of cardboard here, and I like to just sort of line the bottom of these beds with a layer or 2 of cardboard. It gives a nice surface to work with. It helps prevent any weed seeds that may be dormant in the soil from sprouting. And also, cardboard breaks down very easily over time. So within, I'd say, 6 months to a year, it'll be gone anyway, and the worms love to consume this stuff. So it'll add a little bit of organic matter to the soil, help attract some worms, and provide that nice weed barrier. So, and plus, it recycles a resource in a beneficial way, which is just a really added extra bonus too. So if you don't have cardboard, multiple layers of newspaper will work as well. But I had the cardboard, so I'm gonna go ahead and use that in this case. Okay, well, thanks for watching me go through this process and this journey of building these beds. One thing I really should mention, just to encourage you to try this, if you haven't done this before, is this is the first experience I've had making raised beds. I've always gardened in the ground or used sort of pre-made bed kits in the past. I've never made them before from scratch, and so really you don't need a lot of experience to do this, as long as you know how to use maybe a power drill, of course, and that's really it. So other than that, I encourage you to give it a shot. It's a great way to start gardening, to really control your soil, and it's really not too intimidating. So with that, please subscribe to Urban Farming Education for more educational videos like this, and we hope to see you again here in the future.